Student notes questions are basically the evil trap at the end of reading writing modules on the SAT. You think you're doing completely fine, you think everything is going well, but then suddenly a student notes question jumps out at you and destroys your entire test. I gotta be honest, we talk so much about the other stuff on the reading section of the SAT that we almost never mention student notes questions, which is kind of bad because they can sometimes be really hard. I even had a student one time who was really good at everything on the reading section of the SAT, but he just saw this really hard student notes question and he ended up actually losing a couple points just from that. So we cannot ignore them. But thankfully the strategy for approaching these questions is a lot simpler than it might seem at first. And so with the right process, you can go from struggling with these types of questions to absolutely dominating them every single time. Let me show you the strategy for approaching student notes questions. The first thing you gotta do whenever you see a student notes question is identify what it is asking for. Every one of these questions has a very unique thing it is asking for. It's kind of like a fun surprise. Okay, maybe not that fun, but it is a surprise at least. The student is drafting an essay that highlights the potential climate benefits of restoring mangrove habitats. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to advance this focus? Before I even look at the choices, I need to make absolutely positively 100% sure that I understand what the question is asking for. If I start looking at these choices without knowing for sure what is being asked, there's a very high chance I'm going to mess something up, or I'm just going to get distracted by a shiny object and go for a choice that's completely 100% wrong. We are trying to highlight the climate benefits of restoring mangrove habitats. Put more simply, we're trying to say that if we restore these mangrove habitats, the fate of the climate will improve as compared to if we did not restore the mangrove habitats. Sounds simple enough. We'll come back to this in a second. The student wants to explain a cause and effect relationship between rising ocean temperatures and coral reef health, supporting the explanation with a specific example. So right here, we're just trying to show that when ocean temperatures rise, coral reef health improves as well. But more importantly, we also want to make sure that there's a specific example that supports the explanation. So we're looking for the choice that accomplishes all those different things. Finally, for this one, the student wants to emphasize how much more closely teens in the United States approach the recommended caffeine limit than adults do. So we're basically trying to showcase that teens are much closer to the recommended caffeine limit than adults. They're consuming much more caffeine on a daily basis than adults are, which makes a lot of sense considering, Celsius. One thing I'll say is that if you're a really good reader, if you're really good at this reading passage stuff, you don't necessarily need to rephrase the question in your mind before looking at the choices. But if you're struggling a bit, if you notice some stuff that's a little bit more confusing than what you're used to, then definitely go ahead and do that. Step 2 is just accomplishing the goal that we decided for the previous step. The important thing to remember is that you do not actually need to read the notes for these questions. This may seem a little bit shocking, you may be amazed that I'm saying this right now, but just the common truth. Most people agree that you don't need to read the notes for student notes questions. Because the truth is most of the choices themselves are going to have more than enough information to fill in for everything you need to know. So let's start with this question again. We're trying to highlight the potential climate benefit of restoring mangrove habitats. So as mangrove habitats go up, climate goes up as well, essentially. So we're just looking for the answer that has the most direct explanation as for this. Look at it yourself real quick and try to see if you can figure out what it would be. So let's look at choice A. Carbon sequestration is far more efficient in mangrove forests than most land-based forests. This honestly could be a good answer because it's essentially saying that mangrove forests are really good at storing carbon, which is a big thing for helping the environment. But notice how they don't really mention anything about the environment. It's not really that clear what's happening here. They also do not even mention restoring mangrove habitats. They just mention that mangrove forests on their own are good. So this could be a good choice, but let's see if we can find a choice that's better. The important thing to remember for student notes questions is that you're not necessarily just trying to eliminate choices here. You are actually trying to find the choice that is 100% the best out of the 4 given. This is different from the other passages on the test because other passage questions, you're typically just trying to eliminate choices. But now we're actually trying to find the best one. A 2022 studies tracked carbon accumulation in forest mangroves for 25 years and noticed comparable rates in restored and undisturbed sites after 10 years. I may be kind of confused about this at the first time reading it, but if I really think about what's being said, it's saying that restored mangrove forests and also undisturbed mangrove forests have the same exact carbon accumulation. That is again kind of good. It's saying that carbon accumulation in the restored forests basically match the undisturbed one. So if you restore it, you're basically going to be getting as good as an undisturbed forest. But it's still not that clear. If I'm reading this the first time, it's kind of weird what's being said. I'm kind of confused after reading it. So it just doesn't feel as concrete answering the question, but still it could be a good choice. C. The researchers concluded that restored mangrove sites could eventually match the carbon storage capacity of undisturbed forests. Notice, this is just the most direct and simple answer for the question. We're trying to find that restored mangrove sites can help the environment. This basically says exactly that. Restoring mangrove sites could eventually match the carbon storage capacity of undisturbed forests. So this definitely appears to be the best choice so far. Let's just look at this one. Restoring mangroves in Florida has been the subject of study for decades. Nothing answers the question there. They're just saying that they've been studying it for decades. That does not answer at all what we're looking for. So A, B, and C are all good choices. C appears to be the most direct and simple, so I'm going to go for C for this one. Now this one. Cause and effect relationship between rising ocean temperatures and coral reef health. We also need to find a specific example to showcase this. Okay, so ocean temperatures can rise 1 to 2% above normal for sustained periods. During the 1998 bleaching events, 16% of the world's coral reefs were affected, and Acoropora species lost up to 90% of their tissue. So I guess it's actually saying here that you just need to support the idea that ocean temperatures affect coral reefs in some way. So not necessarily that they make it better, but just that they affect it in some way. I did not realize that the first time I read through this. Now, I just want to say for a second, let's say that you're getting really confused as you're reading. Let's say you just absolutely are not making any sense of this passage. One thing you can do is use highlighting to make more sense of it. What you want to try doing is highlighting just the words that are necessary to make a complete thought out of the sentence. So ocean temperatures can rise above normal. During the 1998 event, 16% of the world's reefs were affected. Acoropora species lost up to 90% of their tissue. It's pretty clear what's being said there. Ocean temperature can rise above normal, and during a specific event, it really hurts the coral reefs. Now it makes a lot more sense than if I'm just reading it blindly the first time. This definitely appears to be a good choice. Let's look at the other ones just to make sure. Like the 1998 event, future bleaching episodes are expected to damage coral reefs worldwide. So you see, this is again a fine choice, but it's kind of a little bit unclear. Like they're just mentioning this 1998 event. They don't really explain what's happening there. So it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit clunky. It could be a good choice, but honestly, if I'm choosing between A versus B, I would almost immediately go for A. So I'll just eliminate B because it's definitely not beating A at the end of the day. Acoropora corals lost up to 90% of their living tissue in 1998, showing that some species are more vulnerable than others. This is so close to being a good choice, but they don't really mention why they lost the tissues. They just say that they lost it. They don't mention anything about the ocean temperatures rising or any of that. So it's not really specific enough. It's not clear enough again. A is definitely better. Rising ocean temperatures can trigger widespread coral reef bleaching. For instance, a 1 to 2 degrees Celsius increase in 1998 led to bleaching on 16% of the world's reefs and caused Acoropora corals to lose up to 90% of their tissue. I gotta say, I think we found the choice that is better than A, because this is even more specific. It says rising ocean temperatures literally cause the coral bleaching, which causes these problems. I gotta be honest, I can't really explain exactly what it is, but this just feels stronger than choice A, because they just say that ocean temperatures rose and then the coral reefs are affected. Whereas for this one, it's like ocean temperatures literally trigger widespread coral bleaching. It's like very clear, very direct, very simple. I guess part of it is because they use active voice versus passive voice, but that's fine. You can definitely feel that it's more direct, more specific, more clear, so therefore D just is going to be the right answer for this one. A, B, and C were all good choices, but only D answered the question the best way possible. Finally, let's look at this one. We're trying to say that teens get closer to the caffeine limit than adults do. Daily caffeine consumption in the United States is 240 milligrams for adults and 90 milligrams for teens, compared with the respective recommendations of 400 milligrams and 100 milligrams. So this is kind of good. Like it's saying that the recommendations are these, and you can just visually see that, okay, teens are definitely much closer than the adults are, like 90 to 100 versus 240 to 400. But they don't really come out and say it. They don't ever say like, okay, the teens are literally so much closer than the adults are. So it's a good choice, but again, it's not as specific as I would like. In the US, recommended caffeine limits are 400 milligrams for adults and 100 milligrams for teens. Surveys show that both groups consume less than these limits. Not really that good at all, because they're just saying that both groups consume less. We're not saying anything about one group getting closer than another one, so no matter what, this is definitely worse than A, and even if it wasn't, it just feels wrong. Adults consume 240 milligrams of caffeine on average each day, whereas teens consume 90 milligrams, meaning both groups stay beneath the respective recommended limits. Same problem as with B. It does not say anything about teens getting closer than the adults. Although both adults and teens in the United States consume less caffeine than recommended, teens come far closer to their limits. They average about 90% of their 100 milligram ceiling, whereas adults average only 60% of their 400 milligram ceiling. That is it. That is specific, that is direct, that's clear. It's definitely answering the question. It's definitely better than choice A, so definitely D is going to be right. Let's just finally look at this one. This is a completely new question. The student wants to highlight the study's main finding. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information to accomplish the goal? Main finding means the result of the study. If I do a study about how skibbity toilet rails affect students' ability to focus, the absolutely destroyed ability to focus will be the result of the study. That's the finding that we will probably find. Urban heat islands create hotter microclimates that research aim to mitigate by increasing tree cover in cities. So I think this probably seems like a main finding. The islands are hotter microclimates, and that's good. So it's probably a good answer. To understand urban heat islands, researchers measured surface temperatures in 25 city parks. Okay, definitely wrong because we're talking about the methodology of the study. Back to my Skibidi toilet example, the actual process of giving students Skibidi toilet reels and testing their focus is going to be the methodology. But that's not the findings. The findings are just the results of it, so B is not going to be it. The cooling effect of city parks is strongest when canopy density is highest, so researchers propose increasing tree cover. This is the hypothesis part of things. The researchers are proposing an idea. Again, not the result of the study. Parks with more than 60% tree canopy can be up to 5 degrees cooler than adjacent streets, indicating that dense tree cover effectively mitigates urban heat. This definitely feels the best. This is the most specific choice, the most direct choice. And so whereas this one is good, it's not nearly as specific as this one. If you're actually doing a study, you would likely find some very specific statistics about the results. Like with my focus example, we would maybe find that okay, Skibidi toilet students are 5 times worse at focusing than non-Skibidi toilet students. We're not just gonna have a vague thing like this up here. If it is vague, it's probably a really bad study. So D is going to be the answer for this one. This is really all you need to know for the most part for these questions. But there is one thing that's important to mention. Occasionally you will see choices that are similar enough to each other that you actually do need to read the notes to differentiate between them. So I went ahead and actually rewrote the previous question to make it adhere to this rule. Let's see how it changes based off this new thing. We're now trying to find what most precisely describes the specific conditions under which the greatest temperature difference was observed. So this is basically the environment under which the biggest temperature difference was observed. So maybe it's going to be something like at 60 degrees, this happened. At this amount of tree coverage, this happened. But we're just trying to look at the environment here. Research team recorded air temperatures in 25 city parks. Again, that's the methodology, so that's not answering the question. The researchers found that parks with at least 60% tree canopy were about 5% cooler than surrounding neighborhoods. Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. 60% tree canopy, 5% cooler than surrounding neighborhoods. Researchers found that during summer afternoons, parks with tree canopy covered more than 60% of the area were as much as 5% cooler than adjacent streets. Okay, so this is even more specific than the previous one. So let me just check to make sure that C actually is accurate. So summer afternoons, what's during a summer afternoon? Yep, says summer afternoon right there. Okay, so C is probably going to be better. It's at least better than B, so we can just eliminate it there. The researchers therefore recommend expanding urban tree cover to help cool cities. Okay, again, not answering the question. C is right. And the thing is, we have to really check the notes to know that B is wrong. Because B and C are so close to each other, we have to make sure that there's not some kind of crazy difference. Maybe they say during summer mornings or something like that. If that was the case, then C would literally be wrong and we'd have to go for B instead. Let's try this one. The student's preparing a brief statement for a city council meeting and wants to add a sentence that most clearly emphasizes both how soon and how severe the projected freshwater shortage is, using a specific information from the notes. So how soon and how severe. So it has to be a timeline thing and also how big the thing is. Using a United Nations report, the student notes that global freshwater demand is projected to exceed available supply by roughly 40% sometime in the coming decades, making water scarcity an increasingly urgent concern. Okay, so 40%, that's the amount. Coming decades, that's the time. So that's pretty good. Citing a United Nations report, the student explains that 2030 global freshwater demand could surpass available supply by about 40%, signaling a steep and rapidly approaching worldwide shortfall. So notice the kind of difference here. We're saying 40% here again, but we're saying that by 2030 this could happen. So not just the coming decades can mean 2050, 2067, whatever, but we're saying by 2030. So this is definitely different from A, so there's going to be some kind of confliction there. Referring to United Nations report, the student warns that 2030 global freshwater demand may begin to outpace supply in many regions, a trend that can eventually lead to shortages approaching 40% if left unaddressed. Okay, again, we're saying by 2030 and approaching 40%. So gonna have some conflict between these choices, I will say. According to a United Nations report, by 2050, global freshwater demand is expected to exceed supply by about 4% worldwide. Okay, 2050, that's definitely different. So we gotta really look at this now. The CNT membranes mimic the water channel's aquaporin proteins, letting water flow rapidly, blocking salt ions. This study found that CNT membranes 70% less for desalination. So by 2030, global freshwater demand could exceed supply by 40%. Okay, so D is gonna be the wrong one. Also A, so it's between B and C now. Which one of these feels the most clear? So this is really close. Actually check for a second. Can you notice what makes the incorrect choice incorrect for these two choices? The answer for this one is actually B. The reason why it is B is because if you look at here, it says that by 2030, they may begin to outpace supply, and that trend could eventually lead to shortages approaching 40%. So it's saying it could eventually happen. So really it's more like saying by 2050, it might get to 40% because it only starts at 2030. Whereas for this one, it's saying that by 2030, it could already surpass 40%, which is what the thing says. So notice that very small, minute difference. We had to really look at the notes for this one and really check to make sure that it was accurate. but for that reason, B would be the right answer. Truthfully, there are only 3 reasons why you might get a student notes question wrong. If you don't understand what the question is asking for, if you misread one of the choices, or if you neglect to read the notes when you actually do need to read the notes. If you can do all 3 of these things though, you can almost guarantee that you're going to be getting every single one of these questions right. If you're struggling though to even understand what the passages or the notes or the question choices are saying, I actually have a free course in my community that showcases how to better go about reading passages on the SAT and actually understand what they mean rather than just skipping through a bunch of sentences. If you want to access that for free today, check the link in the description to join my free school community. It's right there in the classroom page, and I'll see you there. Let's ace this next SAT, guys. Thanks for watching this video.
This had SAT, yeah, it's pretty mean. Trying to judge my whole life off a test on the screen. One shot, one run, no pause to rewind. If I panic, I'm done. If I trust, I'll be fine. Yeah, this SAT got my chest on freeze.